All aboard for excitement with everyone's #1 train, Thomas the Tank Engine.
I'm Thomas. I run this branch line.
This delightful collection of award-winning videos takes you on a magical journey around the island of Sodor. It's an enchanting world where life is never boring and fun lies around every bend. Now you can be part of the adventure with Thomas and all his railway friends. There's cheerful Percy, James in his splendid red coat, the proud and strong Gordon, and the ever-faithful Toby. And don't forget the superintendent of the railroad, Sir Topham Hatt, who makes sure everything keeps right on schedule. Each video contains a variety of fun-filled stories that teach the values of friendship, working together, and the importance of trust and honesty. Every journey is one you will want to watch again and again. Bring the fun out of the roundhouse and into your house. Add all of these titles to your Thomas collection today.
It had been raining hard for weeks. Toby was feeling miserable. Everywhere was wet, wet, wet. His branch line runs through a village. The water in the river had risen with the rain. Only the Great Wall, known as a dam, was stopping the water from overflowing. Percy arrived just as Toby was about to inspect the dam for any damage. "Driver tells me it may be dangerous up there." "Please be careful, Toby," said Percy. "I'll try," replied Toby bravely. Percy watched anxiously as Toby trundled away. His journey took him over a wooden bridge at the end of the village. The river surged dangerously beneath it. Harold the helicopter was inspecting the dam as Toby arrived. "Be brave, Toby," called his driver. "We have to cross to the other side." The dam did not look safe at all. Toby was very worried. Soon he knew why. "The dam's breaking up! We must warn everyone!" Toby shunted back as fast as his wheels would let him. Percy was waiting anxiously for Toby by the bridge. The river had risen so high that the bridge was in danger of collapsing. "The dam's breaking up. We must find high ground," shouted Toby's driver. "Your only chance is to cross the bridge," called Percy. "It doesn't look safe to me," wailed Toby. "It's our only chance," said his driver. "If the dam breaks, we'll be done for." Toby was halfway across the bridge when disaster struck. "Help!" called Toby. "We'll follow him on our line. It meets the river further down." As Toby floated helplessly on the floodwaters, they passed a sign that made them shudder. Beware the waterfall. If we go over that waterfall, we're doomed. Then they saw Harold, who swooped low and shouted urgently to them.
We're going to drop a rope to you. Attach it to yourself, quickly now.
And they did, to one of Toby's buffers. Just then Percy arrived. Harold flew over to him.
Catch the rope and pull Toby to safety,
he called. Toby was safe at last. When the floods were over and the dam mended, the villagers had a big party for Toby, hosted by Sir Topham Hatt. You were very brave, Toby. Thanks to Harold. I could never have been so brave, Toby. Oh, I'm sure you would be, but you never know till you've tried. Percy rather hoped he'd never have to. Percy puffed grumpily into the yards. He was feeling put upon and said so. I feel put upon, he complained to Thomas. Thomas was confused. Put upon what? The rails? No, put upon with work. Driver says he is too. Put upon? What a silly saying, replied Thomas. But Annie and Clarabelle liked it, and they sang about it too. Percy's been put upon, put upon, put upon. Percy's been put upon, poor old Percy. Percy is being put upon. I am. He collected metal from the foundry, coal from the yards, flour from the mills, rock from the quarries, and fuel from the depot. Then he delivered it all to the docks. Next, he collected some empty freight cars. Who's this dirty little engine? Cried the freight cars. We want Thomas or Duck. Percy ignored them. Put upon, that's what I am. That night, all the engines laughed at him. We can see what's been put upon you, said Thomas. Silence, said Sir Topham Hatt. Percy, you've done a good day's work. Now get a good night's rest. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Next morning, he took some freight cars to the coal yards. Then he had to push empty freight cars to the mine shaft. When he arrived, there was trouble. The foreman spoke to his driver. The freight cars are stuck on the mechanism. All they need is a good push. We'll do it right away. Percy shunted back to where a large canvas barrier was used to protect his line from loose rocks. Percy charged at the line of freight cars too fast and too hard. Oh no, gasped Percy. The freight cars broke free, but ran out of control to the mines below. On, faster, faster, the silly freight cars yelled. Then there was trouble again.
Get out of here fast! The mine's collapsing! We'll just have to make a run for it, Percy, called his driver.
There's going to be an avalanche, wailed Percy. And he was right. Worse still, the track he was on began to crumble. "Oh, help!" wailed Percy. Then he remembered something he had seen earlier. "There's a canvas barrier by the track. That might save us." They were just in time. Percy was right. The canvas did indeed save them, but the miners didn't know that. "The avalanche has buried an engine and its crew," shouted the foreman. "We must help them." When Percy had been rescued, Sir Topham Hatt spoke to his driver and fireman, then to Percy. "Driver told me how brave you were, Percy. As a reward, you will be repainted at the works." "Oh, thank you, sir." When he returned, Percy's coat glistened in the sun. "I'm sorry we teased you, Percy," said Thomas. "You were certainly put upon by that avalanche." "Yes, indeed. But just look at my new coat of paint." Now, I don't mind that being put upon me. It was a busy time at the docks. All the engines were working hard, pushing and pulling freight cars about. One morning, Percy was late. Cranky the Crane was quick to criticize. "These ships can't be kept waiting. They have important cargo. If they miss the tides, they will be delayed in the docks. You should look up to the ships and show more respect. You are, after all, only little." "We've got too much work," huffed Percy. "Then perhaps a lorry should do your job." Percy was shocked. He told the other engines what Cranky had said. "Stuff and nonsense," snorted James. "We engines run this island," said Henry. "What if a lorry does arrive?" I'm afraid it did, along with 2 more. Cranky was delighted. "Hey, you down there, your job's done now. These lorries are taking over. One of them wants to talk to you." The lorry was very rude.
"What's that steaming lump of scrap iron doing here? Be off with you!"
Scrap iron? Steaming scrap iron? Ha! A little later, Percy met Thomas and James. Another lorry was being rude to them. Then he saw Percy.
"Oh, look, it's a little green goblin on wheels. You'll be scrapped. Just you wait and see."
"Well, bust my boiler. What a horrid lorry," exclaimed Thomas. "Despicable," agreed James. The next engine to meet a lorry was Toby.
Well, well, well. No wonder this railway's a mess. You belong in a museum, not working in a quarry.
"I might look old, but I'm very useful."
"Useful? Pah!" replied the lorry. "Just you tootle off."
"Tootle?" spluttered Toby. "Come along, Toby," interrupted his driver. "Don't bother to argue with him. We'll go to the flour mill instead." But when they arrived at the flour mill, Toby was shocked to see yet another lorry. "What are you doing here?"
"We 3 are doing your work now. You're too slow."
The foreman spoke to Toby's driver. "I'm sorry. Times are a-changin', I'm afraid." "Toby might be old," replied his driver, "but he's reliable." "Come on, Toby. We'll go to the farms. They'll still use us." Toby trundled sadly away. His railway ran through a narrow gorge, but vehicles had to tackle a steep and dangerous road. When Toby arrived, he saw the lorry from the quarry again. It was loaded with rock. "That lorry's in trouble," thought Toby. And he was. The driver was thrown clear.
Rotten roads,
He muttered. The wrecked lorry was taken to the docks. Percy looked at the lorry. "What's this lump of steaming scrap iron?" he teased.
I'll be back, replied the lorry, so you can wipe that silly smile off your smoke box.
"Ha!" said Percy, and wheeshed him loudly. Then Butch, the breakdown vehicle, arrived. He was towing the lorry from the flour mill. "What happened?" asked Toby's driver. "He was overloaded with flour," came the reply, "and he broke down." "Not very useful now, are you?" said Toby. "Grrr," replied the lorries. Then James whistled excitedly. "They're bringing in the third lorry on a barge." "What happened to that one?" James asked. "Stupid lorry was reversing and fell straight into the sea," said the tow truck man. Later, Thomas arrived. He looked at the three lorries and laughed. "Well, well, well, the Brothers Grimm. Smashed, broken, and sunk." The lorries didn't return, and the engines now work even harder to make sure they never will. One day, George the steamroller was waiting for Percy to take him to a new workplace. George was being rude to Rheneas and Skarloey.
You're just worn-out wheels on worn-out rails.
"You need rocks for your roads," replied Skarloey, "and we're helping you."
I need to flatten little engines in the scrap yards,
retorted George. Then Percy arrived to take George away. He was still rebelling.
Railways are no good. Turn them into roads.
The little engines were pleased to see him go. George grumbled all the way to the old branch line. He was going to turn it into a road. When they arrived, George was rude again.
Bumpy ride on rotten rails. I'm glad it's over.
"So am I," said Percy.
Ha!
Huffed George. Percy was still fuming when he met Thomas. "What's up, Percy?" "It's George. He makes me feel down." "Just ignore him," puffed Thomas. George was now enjoying himself.
Ripping up rails, he chortled. What a life! What do you think of this, Thomas?
Thomas took no notice. George felt insulted.
You're a useless blue puffball.
But Thomas didn't hear.
I'll show him who's boss.
At last, the workmen reached the level crossing. "What shall we do here?"
"Tear it up, tarmac it,"
said George. So they did, but not properly, and George knew it. Later, Thomas was traveling home on the same line. He was pulling freight cars filled with vegetables. The signalman had forgotten to warn his driver about the crossing. "That's nice. We don't need to stop," said Thomas happily. "Yes, we do," called his driver. But it was too late. Next day, Percy told Gordon all about George.
"Huh!" snorted Gordon. "You're just a small engine. That's why he's rude to you. He wouldn't dare cause me any trouble."
George had been taken to some yards to work. Duck arrived with a train of empty freight cars. George was blocking his way, and a car was stuck on the main line. "Let me through," demanded Duck.
"You'll just have to wait,"
replied George. There's no time to wait. I must clear my freight cars from the main line to let Gordon through.
Then he'll have to wait too,
said George. Duck's driver went to complain to the station master, but the signalman had set the signal to allow Gordon to speed through. His passengers were singing his praises, and he was making express time.
I'm the greatest! Just watch me fly by!
He whistled long and loud as he approached the station. Suddenly, he saw a freight car on the line ahead.
Get out of my way!
But the freight car wouldn't move until Gordon forced it by accident. Gordon was worried that Sir Topham Hatt would be cross. He was, but not with Gordon. Whoever caused this disturbance will have me to answer to. And he did, a few days later. Look who's here, said Thomas. George had been found out by Sir Topham Hatt and punished. He looked miserable. Now we'll get some peace at last, said Percy.
I want to get rolling again, but I've got to wait a whole week till I do.
And then you'll be just as rude as ever. Eh, George? I hope not. Don't you? One day, Thomas was at the quayside of a small village. Fish were being loaded into his cars. The work took a long time. The fishermen were using old equipment, and Thomas was worried. I'm going to be late for Henry at the docks. He won't like this. Please hurry up. Thomas was rudely interrupted. His driver and fireman laughed. Phew, sniffed Thomas. What a pong! He was glad when they were speeding along the beautiful coastal run. Then they saw a man waving a red flag. What's the matter now? High tides are damaging the track, reported the man. I've marked the spot. We'll go and inspect, said the driver. It would be dangerous for heavy engines like Henry, agreed the driver. But for Thomas, it's safe enough. The guard left a red oil lamp by the damaged track to warn engines. When we get to the docks, I'll tell them to close the line. Henry was waiting for Thomas's cars.
Pah! You're late. That smell is making me ill.
It's the fish, replied Thomas, and there's danger on the rails. That's why we're late.
Ha! You're the only danger on the rails, Thomas. Now stop wasting time and get your cars hitched to my train.
Thomas's driver and fireman were in the yardmaster's office when they heard Henry's whistle. He was steaming out of the station with his long, heavy train called the Flying Kipper. What route is Henry taking tonight? Asked the driver. The coastal run, it's the quickest. But I told you, gasped the driver. That's dangerous for a big engine like Henry. The yardmaster quickly phoned the signalman. Henry roared past the signal box.
I'll soon make up for lost time.
The signalman couldn't hear the warning. By the time he did, Henry was far away in a cloud of steam. But when Henry reached the coastal track, his hopes for a fast run were dashed. Fog floated everywhere.
I can't see,
cried Henry, nor could his driver. And when he could, it was too late. As soon as the tide was high enough, Henry was craned out of the water.
Engines don't swim, Henry. You were meant to deliver fish, not swim with them. You should know that by now.
Yes, sir. I'm sorry, sir.
When Henry arrived at the docks, Cranky the Crane looked down on him.
My, Henry. I expect you'll have some fishy tales to tell. But take my advice. Have a long hose down first.
But there was worse to come. Look, they've caught all this fish and a green whale, too. It's not a whale, it's a monster. Henry was most upset. Thomas now felt sorry for Henry. Come on, your driver says it's time for a nice washdown. Then you'll feel much better. And Henry did.
I'm sorry I was rude to you, Thomas.
That's all right. But can you smell something?
What?
Fresh air,
Oh, yes.
replied Henry happily. Oliver and his brake van Toad liked working in the big yards, but one morning Toad noticed that Oliver was unhappy. He decided to find out why.
Excuse me, Mr. Oliver. It seems to me that things are not well with you. If you forgive me for mentioning it.
You're quite right, Toad. All I do is shunt these freight cars onto the turntable. I long for a nice run. It's what an engine really needs.
Quite so, Mr. Oliver. May I suggest that you speak to Sir Topham Hatt about your problems?
But Oliver said nothing. He just grew unhappier, and he was rough with the freight cars. You're no good, Oliver. You're dangerous. We want Percy. Percy's far too busy to be bothered with the likes of you. And Oliver bumped the freight cars hard. You silly engine, shouted a workman. It'll take a long time to repair this turntable, which will cause confusion and delay. That night, Sir Topham Hatt arrived. Oliver, you have caused confusion. I thought you could control freight cars. You shall work the mail train for a while. Maybe the night air will clear your smoke box. Yes, sir. Sorry, sir, said Oliver sadly. Cheer up, old chap, said his driver. The mail train run is a grand run for a fine engine like you. Oliver smiled, but he still felt he had let everyone down. His driver took them along the coastal run with the mail train. The fresh air couldn't help but brighten Oliver's spirits. They made good speed until it was time to collect some important mail from Harold the helicopter.
Come on, Harold!
At last, Harold landed. Sorry I'm late, Great Western. Had a bit of a problem with one of my arms. Kept letting me down when I was meant to be up. You know how it is. We know that we'll be late for our first run, replied Oliver's driver. Soon they were on their way again. Ahead was a red signal light. Oliver didn't realize that the signalman had dozed off. Oliver whistled several times, but the signal stayed red. There must be something wrong with that signal. We'll go slowly and stop by the signal box, said his driver. But they never reached it. The points before the signal box were switched to an old track. They were going the wrong way. Oliver's fireman was concerned. We need to find a water tower soon. Instead, they saw an old station. Disaster lay ahead. Meanwhile, Sir Topham Hatt was worried.
Oliver has not returned. We'll send out a search party.
Soon he was high in the sky with Harold.
There they are.
It wasn't Oliver's fault, sighed the driver.
I'm aware of that. I'm just glad to see you are all safe.
Then he saw something. It was an empty old house beside the station. He went to inspect it. When he returned, he spoke to Oliver.
You have found another attraction for our island. We'll make this house as good as new, and visitors can have tea and crumpets there.
Sighed Oliver. Getting lost can be interesting, but being found is much nicer. Especially when it makes an engine feel really useful